All right, what's going on, everybody? This is the second video that I've made, and I want to structure it a little differently this time because I've asked and I've solicited questions on Twitter, but I've also received a lot, and there's just a few things to, I think, clear up. So I want to say that I'm focused on sticking to a plan when I'm doing all of this study because the ultimate goal for me is to trade this market. And to trade this market, you really need to know this market. And to trade the market well, you need to be a master of the market. And so I think that the continual insistence that we really go slowly, take our time, learn each constituent part is really important. And I would compare that to how you would use, perhaps some other people you follow on Twitter. I would say when someone tells me to go long at 3,200 and 3,200 shows and you go long, but then the stock or the future instrument that you're trading turns on you, then it's really a result of you not knowing what you're doing. It's not, it's not that their analysis was wrong, but it's you don't know how to trade it. And, I think that that's completely expected. That's where I've been many times, and that's really the reason I started studying all this, just because I have strong curiosity, but also just a need to understand what it is I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And so I've done this many times, and I think that it's worth saying and worth clearing up what my purpose is here. Furthermore, I do want to be able to do this on my own because relying on someone that you don't know on Twitter to give you trades is virtually impossible, because what if they wake up one morning and decide not to do that anymore? So it's something that is really going to be necessary to me, and I'll keep doing it until I really know how to trade. I thought that it was important to read in the Chicago Board of Trades manual too, that they found that the most successful strategy is to teach traders how to trade, and then they can really trade in accordance with their own risk principles. They can trade with their own strategy, and it's just much more, it's just not a one-size-fits-all situation, and that's why I'm doing this like I'm doing it. So the way I would suggest that you approach this would be to look at what I'm providing all week. They're very short form notes, but I'm basically telling you what you should be learning. And then basically what I'm doing on the weekends is tying it up with a video. So that's what this video is. And one of my friends kind of compared this to a study group, just saying, I'm not here claiming to be an expert or the end all be all on how to do this, but we're all learning together. And as some Twitter users have found, there are clarifications needed in my tweets, and I really invite that. So the other thing I've noticed is that a lot of users have tunnel vision for learning how to trade depth of market and the DOM itself. I know specific Twitter users have said that this is all you need. To those people, I would say that if you're able to do it, then I applaud that, and that's all good and well. But unless you're able to read the market and trade the market, I don't think the DOM is going to be that necessary just yet. So I'm going to stick on the course that I'm going. One of the things I've done this entire time too is pivot from, early on when I started this, it was like drinking from the fire hose. There was a lot of information out there. It still feels like that at times, but what I'm doing is pivoting. I'm making sure that any of the changes I'm making in how I'm going about this are done so quietly. I'm not announcing that on Twitter because I'm trying to minimize disruptions and really keep some sort of continuum, from these lessons. So I'm being very calculated in how I do the entire lesson planning too. So, and I just wanted to say too that since most people here found me through Twitter and found me through specific other Twitter users who are really good at this stuff, this is the method that I'm following right now is exactly what they use to do their order flow analysis. One has said so explicitly, and the other, the two that come to mind, the other has tipped his cap in that direction, but seems to be withholding still. I don't, that's fine. I'm just going through the analysis based on what I think is most important, but certainly using what they did and what they've done and what they've hinted at and what they've shown to guide every single thing that I've done. So I'm going to go ahead and start today's video, just going through and trying to finalize and tie a bow nicely around everything that I've tweeted this week. So again, a reminder, and in my first video, I went through what this TPO profile on the screen is. This is an organization tool. It's not something that's going to be telling you exactly what to trade, when to trade, how to trade, what those levels are. And on the topic of levels, like, let's just slow down and continue to learn the market. So again, looking quickly at the TPO profile on my screen, this is nothing more than a distribution. So a distribution being you have a high, a low, and then you've got like this prominent area out here. So the real thing you're trying to get from this, and actually just to take a step back and explain it well, is it's like in elementary school. You've got some students who get the top score, like an A. You have some students that didn't study and they got an F. And then you have the majority of students somewhere in this like B to C range. And that's, this is nothing more than that. So we're looking at where the majority of, to use this analogy, this metaphor, we're looking at where the majority of students are. In this case, we're looking at where the majority of traders are. The thing that you're using the profile for is trying to see whether prices are accepted or rejected at different levels. At any point in time, this distribution, whichever distribution you're looking at, has a low, it has a high, and it has this area in the middle that's wider. So that's always going to be the case, no matter what time frame you stop your charts on. And on that note, this has been a question up for debate and something I've wondered and got on Twitter too. But I decided to go with 2 sessions: daytime session, the afternoon session. Daytime session Friday, no afternoon session because it was Friday. I think it's nice there's different kinds of activity. There are ways to bring these together, which I discussed last time, but for now, I'm going with that setup. So quickly, going to go through value. There were a few things on Twitter this week. You should probably go back and look at those lessons and make sure you understand each of them, but I'm also going to explain, I'm going to try to kind of tie it into a real profile this time and just explain how you would look at it. So let's just use this one from the afternoon session on 7:30. So Thursday, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here. The basic concept here is that value is established in this center area. And I want to really start to use some of the terms that we're going to be using in the future and that I'm going to be using a lot, and discuss this with another metaphor, because I think it's really useful to think of it in terms of something tangible and something we've all seen. So the thing I thought of was a car dealership with inventory. If at some point in time this car dealership gets 100 BMWs, and they price it at $5, these BMWs at $5 a piece, everyone who sees this is going to stop and buy it because, one, it's a nice car. 2, it's going for $5. And based on their life experiences, they know BMWs are worth more than $5. They do not think, and based on their information that they have, they perceive that a BMW at $5 is going to be really a great value. And that's really something you can apply here too. When looking at this, you've got this point of control pink line through the middle. And at some point in time, traders found that this area was a fair price. Now, if this was priced down here, so again, going back to the BMWs, if this was priced way down here, it was bought up, but inventory ran out. And so what happens over the course of a trading session is the inventory runs out down here, and eventually that car will get priced somewhere here in the middle where people say that that's a fair price. People think that that's a price that they can go back and forth. Producers can make BMWs and they can sell BMWs. Just like going back to the BMW metaphor again, is if that BMW is priced at, let's say, $100,000 now, let's think about that being up here. The basic concept there is that maybe 1, 2, 3 people are going to buy that BMW at $100,000, but ultimately is perceived not as being good value. And so that's an unfair high up here. And what that tells you, and what that leaves up here, is you can see that during this session, and actually in the very first start of the session with this R, price came up here, but when that BMW got too expensive up here, it was ultimately rejected. People were not buying it at $100,000, and it leaves these single prints at the top. And ultimately, price settles back down here in the middle where they can find a two-sided auction. This is a good example too of a balanced day, because there's just a really long, wide base in the very initial session. It does leave some of those single prints at the top, and again, single prints are not something I'm going to specifically get into for at least another week on how to analyze that, because I personally am still learning a lot of that stuff. At any given time, I'm roughly, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days ahead of what I'm posting on Twitter. And the way I like to do it is loop back around to some of those old concepts and use Twitter to reinforce that in my mind. So that's how I'm doing it. But yeah, so anyways, I just wanted to explain that concept of value being here in this wide center area. Pretty simple when you break it down in that way and in a way that you understand. And I would encourage you to continue to use the car dealership just as an example, because that inventory down here was not being, when the inventory came down here is actually bought back up and auctioned back up to better value. So it's just the concept being that something priced too low is just, it's not going to hold too long, and it moves back into an area where they do perceive value. To extend the analysis on the TPO profile, I'm also going to talk about participants today. One of the things that I've been talking about in the last few days is the concept of short-term and long-term traders. And I want to be a little more specific in what these are, because I got a question and I think it's worth pointing out. One of the things that I mentioned a few days ago was that traders can be categorized into more or less two different categories. You have your short-term and something that's longer than short-term. So in some of the literature, it's called other time frame, or long-term, or you can call it swing traders, whatever is over a day. And then your short-term are just your daily people. So meaning your people who need to trade that day or who are intraday traders. So the main thing to take away from this is that you have these two players, and they're very important forces in the market. And these two are looking for different things. The scenario that I came up with for this one was just thinking about airline tickets. And actually, this is something I've seen elsewhere on Twitter, kind of explained in a different way. But if you're planning way ahead for travel, you're ultimately going to, there's a few things to look at when you're about to travel or buy an airline ticket. If you're planning ahead, if your dates are flexible, if you think price right now is too high, completely unreasonable, something you wouldn't pay for, what you can do with the airline industry is wait a week. It's very common that people just say, well, I'll wait and see where prices are. You can shop around looking at different airlines over the next week or 2 or 3, depending on your schedule, and you can ultimately go with what is the most advantageous price for you. So I think about this in terms of a stock and buying a stock. At some point, the long-term trader wants to buy, but that long-term trader doesn't have to take anything immediately. That long-term trader can wait till tomorrow or the next day or the next day and buy at what they think is a very advantageous price. So in the case of the TPO profile, that's going to be your unfair lows. So that's your person who is waiting and looking for the most advantageous place to get in. They're looking for something that's cheaper than where we are right now. This is completely in opposition with your day trader, though, because they're not waiting. They need to trade today. They're on a shorter time frame with different objectives. They may want to close their positions out in the next hour. You never know what that is. But the folks who are trading that way in the near term are just looking for what's fair. They're looking for something that they think is not too outrageous. I kind of thought about this in terms of work travel, or if I'm going home for just sort of a necessary trip, let's say like a graduation or a funeral or something. I must buy that ticket soon because I have to go on those dates. I have to be there that weekend. But at the same time, I'll wait at least a little bit and look around and look for the best price. And so your short-term and long-term traders are coming into the market with these two objectives. One of the things I'll be getting into in the future is just looking at how this market, or how you can use a TPO profile to identify these. And I thought that this day was here on the afternoon session beginning on July 29th. This is at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. When the session opened, you can see we started up here and had this very small initial balance range. Something I'll be talking a lot about in the future, but at this point, I've extended this to be the period that covers the first 30 minutes. So in my case, it's just R and S. And you know what? I actually changed this to be 3 30-minute periods, so it includes T as well. So you can see that there's this very narrow initial balance range. This is typically what we look at as the short-term trader, the intraday trader. They establish this initial balance range over the first 30, 60, or 90 minutes. Again, I have mine set for 90 minutes, but they establish it and they trade in this range. You can see on different days, if I jump over here, this range is much wider. This range also is very wide, but this one's small. What the initial balance range shows you is that short-term traders are finding a two-way place to conduct that two-sided auction. If you jump over here, though, you can see it was a much narrower base here. And ultimately, you can use this to identify the short and long-term traders. What I can do here in this TPO is you can see these first short, short, short. They establish this range. They're doing some two-sided trading, and eventually it breaks out. And this is what you look for to identify the long-term trader. They essentially have come in aggressively, so they waited a while. We kind of bounced around in here. We rotated down just a little bit, but then finally we started getting these long-termers coming in. They perceived it time to go short, and this is what's called one time framing. Down, 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 down. The auction continues to rotate downward at one time frames from here all the way to here. That's not something I really am getting into today, because the one time framing and several other variables that are part of this analysis process are coming in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to stop there, but really think that what I explained today is a really good place to start. Make sure that you're familiar with all of the concepts that I've come up with today, and that you're able to look at the TPO profile and sort of analyze this for yourself. At this point, you're probably, and the question I continue to get is how to identify levels. How do I know when to trade? And that's all coming. But one of the things you really want to take into account here is just how to break these out, how to read these, what some of the terminology is in a TPO. And if you'll just carry that information forward for a few more days, I'll start getting into the actual strategy. And how to read these kind of single printings here, because we had that real big breakdown, and what the different kinds of TPO profiles there are. Again, I like to keep these short and digestible, so I'm going to stop there.